Testing. There we go. I think it's 7.
All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the June 1st regular session of the City of Kalamazoo Planning Commission. Can we get a roll call?
Yes, Burgess,
Here.
Chambers,
Here.
Harrison, Milliken,
Here.
Patelko,
Here.
Pitts, and Swan.
Here.
All right, thank you. We received an agenda for this evening's meeting. Are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda.
Moved by Burgess. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Chambers. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. We received minutes from the May 4th, 2023 regular session. Any comments, questions, changes? No? Thank you for all the work on that. There's a lot of comments to put forth in there. Seeing no changes, can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the May 4th, 2023 meeting?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Swan,
Second.
second by Patelko. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Any communications and announcements?
Just 2 brief announcements for the July date. We're looking to move forward on July 20th for the July meeting date. We've been talking about rescheduling that, and we notified the clerk's office we would like to lock in the chambers for that date. So we will confirm that shortly once we get that locked in.
All right, so that is in place of what would be the July 6th meeting we will not be having, and instead it will be July 20th. Is that correct?
Correct, and there will be at least one special use permit application for that meeting that we're aware of. And if just a reminder, if you make sure you read in the call-in number for the public comments on the phone line.
Well, that is an excellent segue to our public hearings. Thank you. We'll move right into our public hearings. We have one on tonight, and as a reminder with our public hearings, we will take public comment on this public hearing. We'll invite the applicant to come forward and present the public hearing, or staff, and then we'll have the applicant talk. And then after that, we'll invite the public to come up and speak. And anyone who wishing to speak on this will have 3 minutes to speak to the presentation and give their feedback and comments. If you are watching online and you would like to speak to this item, that phone number is 888-382-9556. That's 888-382-9556. If you would like to make any comments on non-agenda items, we will have a public comment period later in the agenda, and that same phone number will work for that, and we'll take those comments at that time. So, having said all that, our first and only public hearing tonight is the recommendation for approval of a sub-area plan to the 2025 master plan for the Stewart neighborhood. Thank you.
We will have a presentation from our neighborhood activator, Jay Slavey, and I understand there's representatives from the neighborhood here as well.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Jay Slavey. I'm the neighborhood activator for the City of Kalamazoo within the Community Planning and Economic Development Department. So I'm here today to present to you a recommendation for the approval of the sub-plan to the Imagine Kalamazoo 2025 Master Plan, which today is the Stewart Neighborhood Plan 2023. So over the past year, we've re-engaged the neighborhood, residents and other stakeholders to hear from them on how they want to see the growth and development of their neighborhood guided over the next 5 to 10 years. This document is 97 pages and includes over 100 projects across 6 goals that were chosen by the neighborhood themselves. So I do have Gary Wark, who is the board president of the Neighborhood Association, serving as the applicant, and he has a few words to share. What I will personally say is I'm super excited to bring this before you, and was really excited that this was my first neighborhood plan to complete for the city of Kalamazoo. It was great to work with Stewart residents, and I think this serves as a great example to other neighborhoods that, you know, Stewart started this a few years ago and was put on pause for a range of reasons, including COVID-19. And it just shows the resiliency of the people here in Stewart. They came back even stronger and better. And I was so excited to be here at this time to help facilitate them through that neighborhood planning process. So I will yield the floor to Gary now.
Sign in. My name's Gary Wark. I chair the Stewart Historic Neighborhood Association. Our neighborhood association started to formulate the neighborhood plan prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. And thanks to Jay Schlaby, we now have a neighborhood plan. We have a plan that works hand in hand with the Imagine Kalamazoo 2025 plan. We feel it's imperative to partner with the City of Kalamazoo in order to accomplish our goals. The plan itself is comprised of 97 pages and 100 events to complete. Our plan priorities are to promote historic preservation, support the Woodward School, improve pedestrian and street lighting, slow traffic, repair streets, and repair sidewalks. Our 6 goals are to improve connectivity for all users, enhance the public realm, champion community building, address housing needs, promote the historic preservation, and support the Woodward School. Our board is looking forward to implementing our neighborhood plan. Thank you.
And then I just wanted to ask if you had any additional questions for me, whether based on the staff report or the plan itself.
All right, great. Are there any questions or comments for staff at this time? No, it's a very complete document. I have no questions at this time. But we'll see after the public comment. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, this is a public hearing, so we'll open the public hearing. Are there any folks here that would like to make public comment on this item? All right, seeing no one here in the audience, do we have anyone on the phone? No one on the phone. Okay. Well, then we'll close the public hearing. And again, one last chance before we take a motion and open up discussion. Any more clarifying questions for anyone? If not, this is a recommendation, so we're recommending to the City Commission, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I'll need a motion to recommend approval of the neighborhood plan to the City Commission. For the Stewart Neighborhood Plan, and then we can open up discussion.
Well, I will move that we recommend the plan to the City Commission. Approval of it.
All right, we have a recommendation of approval from Burgess. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Chambers. All right. Any discussion on the motion?
If I would just say it was very detailed document. It was a good read. There was a lot to it. It clearly identifies valid goals and lines up some very specific things to do about them. And I think it lines up very nicely with a lot of the city's goals. Seems to be on track and appropriate. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Awesome. Other comments?
The only thing that I would add, I would say I do like the long-term plans of what the Stewart neighborhood did. And it also, like, to piggyback off of you again, it did go along with the city's already planned they have implemented, and it's perfect to, I like seeing the connections, how they're trying to work with the city, and then also looking at the two-way streets and things of that nature, and really trying to connect Stewart back to the city connection. And I thought it was a really good plan, and it was a really good read.
I did have a question. Looking through the plan, I appreciated the suggestions for improvements for pedestrian safety, especially around the train crossings. And I saw that there were some early conversations, and that's sort of in the preliminary stages, it looks like. But I just wanted to know if you could elaborate any more on some of the plans for improving pedestrian safety at the train tracks.
Yes, so I've been involved in some discussions already when working on engagement around the Ransom Street reconstruction project. And so through that experience, I understood how lengthy this can be. So we felt like a first good step to get into the plan was to set up that meeting with the DSTR, the review with MDOT and Amtrak, just so that we can get that out there and get that conversation started specifically along these 3 or 4 crossings that really divide the southeast portion and the rest of the neighborhood in Stewart. And a lot of residents spoke to feeling that divide in many different ways, and we wanted to attempt to bridge that gap through programming, events, and also improvements to the built environment. So I think that as we study the feasibility of a range of improvements based on costs and just logistics, I think we're excited to see what can come about at those railroad crossings, because not only for residents, but for college students trying to get to downtown, any professionals that are commuting by foot from other neighborhoods to get to downtown, that's important to keep them safe, and we want to be able to respond to that appropriately.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion? We've seen a number of these neighborhood plans come before us. This ranks high on the list of one of the strong ones. So excellent work. It's detailed, but yet it's at the same time it's fairly concise in saying exactly what it wants to do and how to do it and how to go about doing it. So kudos. Folks who aren't used to delving into planning things can pick this up and understand why it's there and what it's there for, and that's really what a neighborhood plan should be. So good work. And as was mentioned, it's already paying dividends with the work with the two-way street conversion and how that plan has morphed a little bit in its relationship to the Stewart neighborhood. So well done. Anything else? Seeing nothing, then can we get a roll call vote on the motion?
Burgess,
Yes.
Chambers,
Yes.
Milliken,
Yes.
Patelko,
Yes.
Swan.
Yes.
Great, thank you very much. Okay. So that will move on to the City Commission. Good work. All right, next item, discussion action item. As you've noticed, we have 2 vacancies. We have 2 people who are absent this evening, but we also have 2 vacancies on our Planning Commission. And so we sought some applications for volunteers to sit, and a committee of 3 of our members reviewed those applications, interviewed some candidates, and I believe selected a couple of members to recommend forward for filling those vacancies. Is that fair to say?
That is fair. Okay. That is fair to say.
All right.
So yes, we interviewed, we received a number of resumes, and we interviewed on two candidates really stood out. Both of them had planning backgrounds, both in interest and, in one case, occupation. And so our, is it, Mitchell Curtis had a planning background and interest, and Christine, whose name I have a hard time. DeCenzo worked as a staff planner in Missoula, Montana before moving to Kalamazoo. And one of the things I really appreciated about both of them was their interest in the technical side of planning. As we're entering a lot of technical updates right now, I think they'll be both assets to the Planning Commission with their background understanding of some of the nuances and subtleties of planning.
Thank you. Anything else? So Commissioners Chambers, Patelko, and Swan were the interview committee, review committee, and nominating committee, you might say. So I guess just thank you for your work. It's not a small amount of work doing that, so thank you for going through that process. Anything else to add?
I don't have anything else to add. He covered that they're both very technical with it, so I think both will be very good to sit on this commission.
Excellent, thanks.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Guys, do the candidates have community involvement at all?
They both did. One worked for a local radio station, and then the other one worked for a local construction firm, and they both are very invested in the Kalamazoo city, and they both have done a lot of volunteerism, which I really like too. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And the other thing that I would add is that they both had a passion to serve, which is something that we definitely need. And they both were very excited to serve and be able to, you know, be in attendance so that we can make sure that everything goes accordingly so that we can get things approved and moved along. So I'm really excited about that too.
Great. Well, thank you. So we, our job here is to nominate, and we make a recommendation of these candidates to the mayor, who ultimately appoints these positions, and he does that in conjunction with the city commission. So the motion that I would like to put forward is to move a recommendation to recommend the appointment of these two members to the planning commission, and we're recommending that to the mayor and the city commission. Yeah.
Is that a motion?
Well, I can't make it, but
Just the way you said it.
yeah, well, I was sort of formulating it in my head as I was talking and sort of stumbled over it. So maybe someone can be a little bit more eloquent.
I move to support both Christine and also Mitchell to the mayor and the city commission for appointment to be on the planning commission.
Well done. We have motion by Ms. Chambers. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Swan. Thank you very much. Any discussion? Is voice vote okay?
Correct.
All right. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Excellent. Well, we look forward to Mitchell and Christine joining hopefully in the very near future. Having completed that, we are on to City Planner's Report, which will be the third of our three sort of introductory reviews of the zoning code and map. Mr. Durkee.
That is correct. This is the third zoning code update. As all of you are aware, City Planner Anderson provided the first two, and this is part of the informational background of the substance of the changes we're making. We broke it up into three different sections. And these sections, I think, are pretty appropriate for the technical portion of zoning that we're talking about, because these are some rather dry sections. So I'm hoping to be able to explain them coherently enough without going too deep into the weeds. So starting with, this is the commercial focus zoning update, part of the larger zoning update to relocate and update the city zoning code from Appendix A into Chapter 50, which is part of the overall city code. With the public outreach, we wrapped up last month our 3 public informational meetings about these changes. We held a meeting at K College, we held one downtown at the library, and we held one in Edison at the Dormouse Theater. Those went well, were very well attended, and since those meetings and this information, we're working on revising the updates further to post them probably by next week. And we've put on the Imagine Kalamazoo, on the project page for this, a list of recommended changes that we've received. So some of those are visible to be seen there. And we will have that further update available and provide an update to you guys as well on those changes with further public outreach from there once those drafts are out. Today, I'm going to be focusing on Articles 7 through 10. Currently, Articles 7 through 10 do not exist in Chapter 50. That's part of taking the articles in full, essentially, from Appendix A and putting them in 50. All of these, with the exception of the sign code, as City Planner Anderson described, they've been ran through the wash. So the lighting code update is very minimal, almost a word for word, at least in the last draft that we've put out there. And then the other ones are, they're all development and site related. So these are in tandem with commercial zoning regulations. They also spread into all land uses, but a lot of times the development standards for the commercial zoning or the site characteristics, we're going into these chapters as well. And I will go further into these in the presentation. So to go over again, why are we updating the code and map? Well, what's leading this substantial change? In the master plan, the Imagine Kalamazoo 2025 master plan, one of the goals and objectives was to evaluate our zoning code. The page here lists a lot of those types of things, such as aligning our zoning code with the future land use map, determining barriers to infill development, implementing form-based code standards, and a lot of those were to be tasked, and the way we've decided to do this was incrementally as opposed to one big chunk, so that we have the opportunity to talk about, have the discussions, and put it together in a more thoughtful manner, even though it might be a little lengthy of a process. So here is what the outreach and the review of the code and the map changes, what we've done so far, where we're at. As I mentioned earlier, we've had the 3 outreach meetings across the city. The property owners and occupants were mailed a very brief introductory about the process coming, not the official notices. We have the online interactive map at Imagine Kalamazoo. You can go to the project page, and there is right there on the website a GIS map, and it shows all of the parcels that are proposed for change. It doesn't highlight any existing parcels that are not changing. For example, there are some commercial zones which aren't being rezoned or changed. With that, you can select on the zone to see what it's currently zoned, what the proposed zone is, and a little brief description of the why, why this was C2 as opposed to CC. City Planner Anderson set up availability for the last month and a half for one-on-one meetings with owners, occupants, or anybody interested in the process, teams and in-person meetings, and I know there was a bunch of those. And lastly, just the board presentations and discussions. I know we've presented to the Natural Feature Protection Committee and now the Planning Commission, and any relevant board, we can get the information out there. And again, what is being proposed with this change, and what are we going to focus on today? Here are all of the articles or the chapters of this in the zoning code, the Chapter 50 zoning code. Articles 1 through 6 exist and have the amendments that have been discussed in addition to these and had the presentations earlier. Today's topics are the parking and loading standards. Parking is in reference to off-street parking on private property, a little different from on-street parking, although our code does allow relief by using on-street parking. The landscaping and screening chapter. Screening is another term for fences, so you have planting screens or fence screens. So that does include fences and the landscaping codes and standards. The sign code, I understand some of these items may have been presented to you guys perhaps a couple years ago, and they were set on hold for this larger commercial update, seemed commercially relative. And I'll touch base on how that was largely driven secondarily by a Supreme Court decision. And lastly, the lighting chapter. The lighting chapter covers the private property lighting standards for any multifamily or commercial property in the city of Kalamazoo. So starting with the parking and loading standards, the current parking standard is dependent upon use. There is a minimum number of parking spaces you need. So a house would need so many parking spaces, a dentist office would need a different number, a restaurant a different number. And a way to imagine that is I think you can imagine the impact if a dentist office became a restaurant. The dentist office would require less parking than a restaurant, which has a higher count. The proposed change is to switch that to a maximum. The switching to a maximum is gaining traction in Michigan and nationally. Trying to think of an example of a difference in approaches. Think of that dentist office changing to a restaurant on an existing site. Most businesses understand their need and are probably going to accommodate their need as they see fit. So some sites will run into, if they would like to change the use, they don't have enough parking spaces, it becomes a variance request, or they have to look elsewhere for parking. There are administrative options such as using off-site parking or parking on the street, but again, if someone can't secure parking, a parking maximum like this would, the person would be able to change the use and be able to work with it. Or a new development, sometimes a parking count ends up being higher than what the business may practically need. So instead of saying a minimum, it becomes this maximum. The amount less than that is not of concern. And this is where, again, thinking of the flexibility of any business or development understands their need, and instead of trying to hit a number, they can work, they know where it stops. And in addition to this, there's expanded guidance on variance relief when someone requests to go over the maximum. We have these old developed pre-automobile age sites in the city of Kalamazoo, which are hard to design and accommodate automobile, but we've also got our commercial corridors like stadium or freeway interchanges, which are very auto-oriented and have found that their business need exceeds our maximum. So some of the expanded criteria to evaluate in there is there a limit of on-street parking available? Has the owner exercised all their options with the 660 feet? And are they considering any NFP considerations? So can additional criteria for the ZBA to weigh the request specifically to parking? Because sort of what the perceived opposite effect is, then do you not create an issue of having not enough parking for other uses? So as a way to address some of those highway interchange sites, we've also permit on a connector street an additional above the maximum. So there is the maximum, and administratively you can exceed that by 10%, and on the collector street you can do that up to 20%. A collector street would be more typically your Stadium Drives, your Cork Street. Looks like I had a misplaced slide in there. Beyond the parking maximum, that we haven't made many changes to the code. Still within the code is the option to use up to 20% on-street parking, or to use the parking within 660 feet. I've mentioned that a couple times. With an agreement, if you don't have the parking spaces, if the neighbor next door can accommodate the spaces, and they have by code the capacity for the additional spaces, that's an option. Trying to think of anything else in those parking and loading standards. The loading standards are loading docks and loading bays. There's only minor grammatical changes to there. The setback, size, and all those standards are still staying the same. And the parking also includes the drive lane width and directional information. All of that is remaining the same. And the bicycle parking is remaining a minimum. So by use, there is a minimum number of bicycle parking spaces that is being proposed to remain as a minimum. Moving on to the next section, the landscaping and screening chapter. This is another one, obviously moving.
Bobby, can we maybe take any comments or questions as we go through each chapter?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair Milliken. So yeah, with each one, I'll stop on the parking standards. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Go for it.
Thank you. I'm still trying to understand the move to maximum parking instead of minimum. And I'm thinking of thematically, I know with when it comes to streets, we're encouraging slowing things down instead of speeding things up, and that makes sense for businesses and communities and neighborhoods. The move to maximum parking, are we saying that if a business, like a restaurant, you're using a restaurant example, if someone wants to open a restaurant in a space where there is very minimal parking and it doesn't seem, it's an odd thing, are we saying that the city really doesn't have a concern there, that it's not, that we're kind of depending on the market, it's up to the business to see if it succeeds or fails with that, and we really don't care how much parking there is as far as that, but there's a maximum instead of a minimum? And why the maximum instead of a minimum? Even if you just restate what you already said, it might help me understand.
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
It's a great question, and I still almost have to counterintuitively think about it. That's exactly correct. In administering of the zoning code in the day-to-day, there's a significant portion of the city that's existing on small lots on an existing development. And we've run into a lot of times where someone has a practical use and development, it's appropriately zoned, but there isn't enough parking and they can't fit it because there's not enough land and they can't secure something from the neighbor. It becomes one of those things that jump out at the code quickly and impact it. Obviously, there's a variance relief for that. And then we find opposite of sometimes, not always, but sometimes someone, they have challenge meeting the minimum requirement because they feel they're adding more parking spaces than their business needs. And with the administrative options to use off-site parking or on-street parking, and thinking of the sustainability and the lining up with the natural feature, stormwater protection, a maximum, without a maximum, a parking lot could go to any size. And that was the way the code was written for many, many years until the maximum was put into place probably 4 or 5 years ago. And there's been a learning curve, I think, from the community and for staff in administering it. A way to generalize it is with a maximum, I could see more feasible, make sense development scenarios appropriately zoned. It becomes a yes instead of a no. I think it's a difference between giving the flexibility on a new site if there's too much, or if it's an existing site, it puts it more in the market. So there's an assumption, obviously, that if there isn't enough parking and they can't get customers to their business, that may be enough reason for them to think otherwise. So, but that is the scenario exactly, that someone could put a restaurant in with less parking. They would have a maximum. They could put 1 parking space, for example.
Okay, I think I'm getting there. Thank you.
I understand it, and I'm fully on board, but what I would challenge staff to do is to really look at these numbers, because I think where it's going to be headed is a significant number of variance requests, and the ZBA is really going to be challenged with finding a practical difficulty and granting those variances and weighing your practical difficulty is you just want more parking. And And the owner's like, well, yeah, I want more parking. I've got business. And what's the ZBA left to do? And that's going to be a really hard place to be. And now I'm going to put on a different hat now.
Sure.
There's no differentiation for medical dental office. And I just happened to be at my son's orthodontist appointment. It's an 8,000 square foot building. It has 40 parking spaces, 32 of them were occupied. Under this definition of one space per 300 square feet, they'd be capped at 26. So they would not, they'd be stuck, right? Now, yes, there's some flexibility, et cetera, but they'd be in a jam. We just built 6 15,000 square foot primary care buildings. They each have anywhere from 79 to 82 parking spaces. They average occupancy of 62 to 64 over the last 2.5 years since they were constructed. They'd be limited to 50 spaces. So it wouldn't work with that. So I know medical dental is really going to be stressed with the 1 per 300 square feet. And they're not going to be in a downtown setting where you've got parking garages and they're going to be in their own dedicated parking lot type area, those medical dental type users. So, and there's a couple others here where I'm not obviously as knowledgeable of, that I can't speak as eloquently about, but I would challenge you to really look at those, because I like the movement, I like the concept, but I don't want us to get into a position where we're faced with these variance requests or constantly giving relief, and then we're coming back in a year or 2 years and amending these to address those.
And by numbers, you mean the mathematical formula per use?
Yeah, sorry. There's a table on 116 and 117 where it says
Correct.
for this use, it's 1 space per X, 1 space per Y, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you for clarifying. So that would be my feedback.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions or comments on this section? All right, awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. The next section in chapter in the proposed changes, again, moving from A to 50, is landscape and screening. As I said, landscaping is the plants and trees around all uses, and screening is also either a vegetative screen or screening like fences, like at a house or a business of any sort. Through this, a lot of the standards or the framework, again, is the same, and the changes or the bulk of the changes or the work done into it was done to align the standards more closely with the NFP, the Natural Feature Protection Standards, and the Community Sustainability Plan. This wasn't a repeat of the NFP standards or the imposing of the NFP standards onto all landscaping. But for example, one of the items is tree protection fencing. So if there's trees on any site being developed, we've been asked for it to have the tree protection fencing in relation to the tree canopy information and goals outline. We have proposed to add the change for single-family home and duplexes that a tree is on the site, whether existing or planted. And on sites with more acreage, it will ask for one more tree per acre than beyond the regular standards, and more clearly specifies the ability to, if a site can't fit it in an area along the front, to have the option to put the trees in the street right of way. The idea being those things can help get the city closer to where it wants to get with the tree canopy. For example, our current landscaping standards only apply to multifamily housing and commercial, non-residential development. So essentially someone builds an infill house, there's now something to say, plant a tree. And again, that could be in the yard or the right of way. And then the species types, it's more of the general language of not using the correct terminology, the language for the plant documents to make sure you're using native species to Southwest Michigan, making sure that language matches what the NFP code to prevent invasive species or to encourage plantings not native to the region. And part of the work is to also streamline and clarify those standards. We've put some of the spacing and table documents there's a document called the Landscaping Standards of the City of Kalamazoo. So instead of having one or two of those items within this third document, we've put them in the code. It'll talk about minimum height at planting or the separation of plants. Other landscaping and screening standards, when I talk about the bulk of it being the same, generally on most multifamily and commercial non-residential development, your landscaping standards come into play with the street front. So usually on the private property side of the right-of-way, there's a requirement for some X amount of green space with a formula for number of shrubs and trees. Off the top of my head, I think it's 1 tree per 35 feet, 1 shrub for 20 feet. And then that's dependent on your frontage. Those formulas remain. Adjacent use screening, so if a manufacturer goes in next to housing, there are screening requirements there. Your manufacturing will make that swath of land a little bit wider. Those elements are still there. There's building front landscaping. That's the landscaping along the front of the building that faces the public right-of-way. And then on larger parking lots, parking lot islands and interior landscaping is required. So those formulas, counts, numbers were just moved over from there, and we tried to clean up the language to make it more to the point. For example, it talks about the priority on existing sites. You know, you can direct the priority towards the street front and the building front. Some of the provisions that exist already for existing sites is it's all designed to get a site more into compliance with current standards. So it's either a dollar value of the project or based off of a formula of how much of an expansion you're doing, or obviously you can put the minimum just required. So though in that existing, we spell that out. So someone isn't going, well, here's where I can fit it. I'm not sure where does the city want it. So we provide that direction in this proposed update. And as I said, those provisions still exist. The existing tree protection is depending on any trees that exist on site and their width. You can use that to count towards any tree plantings. And I think overall that is it with the landscaping and screening. As far as the fences, those are proposed to be the same. We have fence standards for residential and non-residential uses, so that's commercial and manufacturing. And I believe there's additional clarification for fence types and standards to make clear gardens or fencing barriers to keep nuisance animals out of your yard, deer. So a little bit of language that allows administrative to go, hey, this type of fence is here because it's for this use, where that currently didn't exist. And you can imagine if, it's blue in the code, then it's blue on the ground. So that's the main points on the landscaping and screening. I'll stop there again for any individual questions.
Any questions on this section? No, the only question I had in the staff report, it mentioned something about changes that are being proposed that relate to court decisions. Are there any, or was that?
Is that in the staff report?
I think that was under signage.
It's under landscaping and screening as well, but I thought perhaps that was a misplaced.
I suspect that's misplaced because
Okay.
the Supreme Court decision is going to be the signs.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure I knew.
I'm not missing some big case on landscaping?
No, not as far as Supreme Court decision pertaining to
Landscaping, okay.
There's been a Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals and a Michigan Court of Appeals case dealing with tree ordinance in Canton Township that could potentially have an impact on the natural features ordinance.
Okay.
I don't see that making any, or compelling us to make any significant changes to the ordinance at this time.
Okay.
Thank you, Attorney Bear.
Not,
Had an
nothing,
opportunity, and that is, he did reference, there was a state case about, out of Canton Township, Michigan, but I don't think that impacted our code edits.
nothing that's affected any changes that we see here today.
Correct.
Great, thank you.
And this, just like the other sections, involves all of the public feedback, staff further reviewing, that in the next draft. Any other questions or comments? Moving on to the sign section. Speaking of Supreme Court decisions, that a few years ago, it's called the Reed versus Gilbert decision. That's Gilbert, Arizona. And overall, what that decision did was said you cannot regulate the content of a sign. The current Appendix A zoning code, you're going to find many, many definitions on the type of sign. So that type of language was out of line with that. What the decision led to was that you can't regulate the content, but a municipality may regulate the size, height, location, and illumination on a property. So within this chapter, instead of listing every sign by type, it describes types of signs. For example, a temporary sign is, it describes a not constructed for long term, able to be removed, not meant to be, be there for a long term, or a projecting sign. It'll reference a sign structure that projects, more than 12 inches from a building face, but no more than 5. So it becomes a description of the structure and the number. And that is how the language you'll find is built now. That's much more of a substantial change to the code. The parts that remain the same that did not change with the way signs are looked at, whether freestanding, wall signs, temporary signs, depending on your zone, there's a formula. So it's sort of a ranked formula. Residential zones for multifamily housing will permit usually a small, low-rise sign a little further back from the right-of-way. The idea being it's a residential area, shouldn't be really bright. And in the proposed changes, the downtown zones and the CC zones match the current CC and what would have been the CCBD zone, the former downtown zone. You get more of a sign allowance. For example, you get 2 square feet of sign area per wall length because that's your intense downtown, your commercial corridors, and then your manufacturing, your live work, and your node districts, I believe, in your CC2 are proposed to be similar to those, but less so. For example, it's a 1-to-1 ratio for the wall sign, a 1-to-1 for freestanding in all those commercial zones and manufacturing zones. Those same formulas exist in Appendix A. The change goes, instead of the CN1 having the 1-to-1, that zone is out of that table and it's now CC2. So we have a mix of the Gilbert decision changing how we describe all the different types of signs versus the amount of signage permitted today versus tomorrow is remaining a like for like generally. And with this as well, the bottom picture there is a graphic. So in a sign code, you can imagine there's a lot of definitions. What is considered the height, what is considered a setback, and then it can turn into questions about that little upper left-hand one is, how do you calculate what the sign face is? So in addition to the definitions, you're going to see a lot more visuals on there, which make the day-to-day administration of the sign code and helps businesses or sign companies or contractors be able to find that answer really quickly. Because there's a lot of sign permits, a lot of sign changes, so to speed up that day-to-day operation, if the people applying for the permits can find it easier, we're hopeful it'll improve that process. There's not many visuals in our current sign code. And back in 2012, 2013, there was a significant amendment to what a lot of people call digital signs, LED signs. The ordinance will call them internally illuminated. The language for those and billboards is, again, just moved. We didn't propose changing all of that. There was a lot of public input on billboards, whether A billboard, I should use the correct terminology, is an off-premises sign, and then there's electronic digital signs for on-premises. So an on-premises sign is a sign that advertises the goods, products, or information on the property. An off-premises sign is something that's directing your attention towards something not on the property. The limit of the number allowed is still the same. There's a credit for if people want to put up digital LED billboard off-premises signs. All of that remains the same. And again, so those allowances stay the same. And overall, I think it would lead to that better day-to-day administration. And there's no proposal of more height or brighter signs as part of that. And that's, in a high level, the sign changes. I'll stop there if there's any questions on the sign changes.
Yes.
I have a question. This is probably from my own personal knowledge. But since the Reed case that came down, and with the new zoning codes updates that were coming, what happens to the businesses that are currently against the code? Are they expected to do anything to bring themselves up to standard?
Great question. The question was, what happens if a business has a sign that doesn't meet the code, or this code causes something and the business doesn't meet the code anymore? The language in the zoning code is non-conforming, and a non-conforming sign can remain in perpetuity. The sign code as written and proposed, when you put up a new sign, it has to meet the current standards. There is relief for, I believe it's multi-tenant signs. So think of your large shopping center signs. We would run into, you're leasing a space at a large shopping center, you modify the sign must be brought into full conformance. A lot of our large multi-tenant big shopping center signs over the last 20 years with that in the code have already reduced, but recognizing that in practicality that relief is in there. So there's some minor relief on existing signs, or otherwise they can remain until such time they're modified in any way. So if they applied for a new sign permit, even a phase change, they would have to modify it. And yeah, so that's how that works.
Thank you. Any other questions? Good, thank you. And
last is the lighting chapter. I don't have very much on this one. This one is, the changes you see in there are largely grammatical. We didn't change the illumination levels. We didn't propose to change illumination levels or the height of light poles. What the lighting code and what the lighting standards regulate are, again, non-residential properties and multi-residential dwelling properties. The illumination levels, the spillover off of the property, covering the light source. Although we did receive some questions and feedback in our open house meetings about lighting, so we've been doing some research on the side. So there might be some proposed tweaks to the code in the next round of edits. Through part of that, I've learned is just how much you can do now with lighting and LEDs. It's remarkable. It's almost easier than ever for whatever the code is. You can program the little diodes in the light in all sorts of ways, and they can adjust it for whatever people need. So we don't run into many lighting issues in our day-to-day administration. So it kind of seems like it works. But again, some of that feedback hearing from the residents about dark sky concerns, NFP concerns, or our park and natural feature areas, thinking of the impacts on wildlife and lighting. Those questions have been brought up, and we're looking at that to see where there's positive changes that could be made to the code for that. And I'll stop there on the lighting code. If there's any questions?
So even though it's shown as all edit here, that's just because it's brand new language to chapter 50.
Correct.
Yep.
So, yep, the strike through would be all of it out of A, and it's red because it's new to there.
Okay.
So
That's good, thank you. Any other comments or questions on this section? Yeah.
The only comment I would love to see is that once the city has found like the new ideas with lighting, it would be nice to hear more, especially when it comes to, like I was at some of the meetings and we were talking about like neighborhoods and having blind spots sometimes and not being able to see like when it's super dark out with some of the older lights. That would be nice to see possibly some more changes with that.
That's a great point. I find the challenge in plan review or code review of the administration of the code is it's a balance between too bright and security concerns for site or illumination, say if, it's a nighttime business and they have a lot of staff changes. I'm always looking to have it a little bit brighter, so. And we'll try to make sure we highlight anything added in there in the changes, so thank you for that. That wraps up the presentation, so those are the 4 sections. I tried to keep it high level and leave it for the questions on any nuance, so I feel confident I could answer any question. I've worked enough with these, so that's it for that presentation unless there's further questions or comments.
Any other questions on these items or anything else in the ordinance at this point? Yes.
Actually, yeah, Commissioner Harrison's comment about creating non-conforming uses and signage actually brought up a question I had about creating non-conforming uses with maximum parking limits. Because I think one of the examples you had up there was the former Wayside site, which has an ocean of parking.
Yep.
And any business in there would automatically be a new business on that side. So would that have too much parking, and what would sort of the remedy for that situation be if a new business had too much parking?
This would, I guess, be one of those future to be pulled over from Appendix A. I believe it's Chapter 9 of the Appendix A zoning code. There's different types of nonconformities. There's nonconforming use. Chapter 50 will have nonconforming site characteristics, or there's nonconforming signs or site standards. So a parking lot that exceeds the parking maximum is we treat it as an existing nonconformity. So if a dentist office moved into Wayside West, they wouldn't be required to reduce the parking space. However, if they propose tearing out the parking space per the non-conforming standards, you've removed the non-conforming, so what you build back would have to meet the current code. So that's how we manage the existing sites. And related outside of the zoning code, when someone does redevelop a parking lot, oftentimes there's stormwater and further, which kind of work on the shape and even reduce it further. Easier to design for a smaller parking lot. But in a sense, it's considered a nonconformity, can remain until such time it's removed, or I think it's beyond 50%.
Okay, thank you.
That is, even though, in the Wayside West case, if it's changed to a dental office, isn't that a change of use? And doesn't that change whether or not it's non-conforming, or does it not apply?
As a site characteristic, I'd be glad to follow up with like a little more clarity on it, but I'm trying to think of how to articulate, there's elements to a site. It could be non-conforming because of landscaping. The light poles could be too tall. And usually when the non-conformity, there's some change, some level of change that they have to meet before you can impose the current standards. And we look at that for the existing parking, because we do have a parking maximum currently where uses have changed. And if it isn't being removed or some requirement doesn't kick in for it to be removed, it's permitted to remain as is.
Anything else at this time? If not, as we've done the past several meetings, we'll open it up to some public comment on this. If there's anyone wishing to speak to this, we'll ask that you, do we have a sign-in sheet somewhere?
Did you want to save the public comment for the did you want to do the
We've
site plan
been
list?
doing it immediately after this
Okay.
item. Yeah.
Sure.
Is there a sign-in sheet? Is that there?
We have a sign-in sheet here, correct?
Is the thing? Okay. So please come to the front, put your name and on the sign-in sheet. Please state your name and address. when you make your comments. And yeah, thank you.
Hello, my name is Iris Potter. I live at 1204 Manor. Next week, it looks like the week of June 5th, we're all going to get to look at the next draft of all the zoning updates, as I understand it. And I think we're all going to get to look at it, so that's a really, really good thing. But once again, there are some things that we should really take a hard look at because they've come up many times, and it is really important. And I looked today at the staff report, and there is the strategic goal impact in it that pulls us back to a number of things. And one of those is environmental responsibility with a subheading of a green and healthy city. So let's keep all of that in mind. So we must look at this from an environmental justice perspective and health for all of our residents when looking at zoning. I do appreciate that staff are looking at the lighting issues because there was some really good feedback from residents, so I'm hoping that that will come back pretty good. So specifically related to the very important NFP, which is a really important part of our zoning. The original intent language is good, and I really don't see why we need to have that word development in there. We're going to come back to that. I think you're going to hear that over and over. There's really no need to even talk about that we're not trying to prevent development. The original language is really good. There also really needs to be that special permit in there for large projects such as car washes. So we're really hoping to see that too. The 25-foot setback can still be changed. We're in like the third revision of the NFP right now, so that really is not that long of a setback. Really hope that we can do that. So yes, we're still in the draft. Things can be changed. You have your opinions, we have ours, staff has theirs, and we really need to look at the strategic vision alignment as stated in that staff report related to impact, and that's how it impacts all residents. So it's not just about how planning and how we're going to develop. It's about, just as it says, a green and healthy city. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tom Howes. I had really organized notes at the beginning of this. Now it's a mess. First time speaking, so a little nervous too. I want to echo everything that the previous speaker just said. I've been to pretty much all of these community meetings, and there are hundreds of people all championing everything she said. So this all contributes to the public participation policy, things on the 25-foot barrier around water. That's like from me to that wall. That's not very far to develop near bodies of water. Loose materials storage near bodies of water, that language had been removed. During the last natural features committee meeting, city planner was trying to communicate that that is kind of not necessary anymore, and when pushed on what constitutes loose materials, they didn't even know. So they said, I'll get back to you on what loose materials is. So if they don't know what it is, then we should at least have that language back. Embolden restrictions on tree removal, adding science-based guidelines on direction, intensity, and color, temperature of nighttime lighting, which was spoken about. 3,000 degrees seems to be the temperature. That's about maybe closer to 3,000. This is closer to 4,000. So those ultra bright white lights, that's closer to 4,000 and disrupts night light habitat, sleep cycles, and so on. So bringing back that warm lighting seems to be a science-based standard. A quick point about the GPI poisoning our town. I've been to these new meetings too. I've heard a lot of people, important people, stand up, including the mayor, say it's not really my area. I don't have the authority to stop that. City planning seems to imply that you can apply language that might prevent something like this happening in the future, or you can add language that might result in accountability at least. This is a big issue of people being poisoned in our town. Preventing it from happening in the first place is probably easier than holding $8 billion company accountable later. And this last point might speak to, I might be naive here or not be educated enough on the NFP language, but this point came to my mind. Unless there's NFP language that states that all development after a first cycle of development that has impacted the land must respect in perpetuity the original characteristics of the parcel, then subsequent development will always be chipping away at an ever-decreasing set of natural features. So it really, unless there's something that says like first round of development, that's it. Like those are the natural features you can take from, because every subsequent development or expansion will always be looking at, well, now we have to respect this new version of natural features that we have here, and that those natural features are just going to keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. That's confusing, but I hope that made sense. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Tina. I live next to our last green space in my neighborhood, Lake to Stockbridge. I live in Southtown neighborhood, the floodplain area. I live in the bowl of Kalamazoo, as James Baker just described. I live in the lowest line area of Kalamazoo, the lowest point. That's what he called it in his flood video. See, in my neighborhood, we flood all the time. And I have been fighting you and all these boards for 6 years to save our last green space, ever since December 18th of 2017, when KVCC wanted to build their growing field. They were going to put it next to me, but instead took away 12 acres across the street. See, taking away that 12 acres of natural green space and building up the ground higher than our homes has made flooding so much worse for us. Now you have our last green space in your rezoning map. Why? It is our savior for the flooding. It is the natural watershed. It has over 100 trees, big and small. Has wetlands and also it is our wildlife's last home in my neighborhood. Did you not know that trees drink a lot of water? Trees help with flooding. Trees improve our quality of life. Trees are good for the environment. Trees and green spaces and preserves and wooded areas help regulate temperature change, help with climate change, filter out all the pollution, which we all know Kalamazoo has a lot of it. So, oh well, we will plant more trees. Small trees planted now will never replace tall, mature trees that in this new rezoning will let developers destroy. They don't even live in Kalamazoo. So please listen to us for a change. All of us who call, come down. We're all concerned for our environment, our city. We need to save what few green spaces we have left. We need to save what preserves we have left. We don't need any more cement lots. We need to help save our environment for our children and our grandchildren's future. See, we don't need any more big buildings or any more cement. No more car washes that can destroy preserves. For once, we don't need this anymore. Kalamazoo needs to not be all about money. We are talking about our lives, our children, our grandchildren, our future. We need to save these green spaces. We have the natural features, which now they're changing it all around to help developers build. Right across the street from the wooded area that they want to rezone, there's the DHS parking lot. Big, huge cement parking lot, empty. Instead of tearing down 100 trees in a floodplain area, where we flood 2 to 3 times a year, we're trapped for 4 days. Come on, guys, it's time to stop trying to take our green space away. Build across the street at the old DHS building. Put your apartments there. Have no problem with that at all. Just please, leave our green space. We need it to survive. Thank you.
My name is Vicki Vanis. I live at 326 Lake Street. I attended some of the public education meetings about changing zoning. The problem with the wording to the zoning code concerning the natural features protection overlay is that it does not give you the option of saying no, of considering the prospect of contributing to urban sprawl over the protection of a natural space, of deciding that a property is just too precious to our ecosystem to allow a business to be built there, of deciding that putting housing for low-income people that would destroy a watershed in a flood zone that is already a low-income neighborhood is not a good idea, especially for the sole purpose of making a few people a lot of money at the expense of the future of many. If the NFP is not able to be used to sometimes say no, then the word protection is meaningless. There are some scientists who are saying that global climate change is already past the point of no return. I hope that they are wrong. But if we are to pull ourselves back from the brink of destroying our planet, it is not going to be saved by Washington. They can barely agree to pay our country's bills. It will be saved by people like you, across the country and across our world, in each county and municipality, making decisions to say no. The price is too high. We need to make decisions to save our world and our home for our children. No one will remember your names or my name, but your decisions will mean that you would be the true heroes in this situation. Thank you for your consideration.
All right, thank you all. Anyone else? Do we have any call-in numbers? And remember that phone number, 888-382-9556. No. Nothing's coming up? Give it just another beat. All right. Well, if not, we'll close the public comment portion of this section. Any other comments or questions? Okay, well, just a, what's it?
Not at this time.
Not at this time. Well, just a reminder, as was mentioned, it's staff's intention to distill all of the feedback, all of the comments from all of these sessions, all the workshops, et cetera, and provide a revised version 2.0, if you will, of the draft zoning ordinance, and put that out. It will probably be on the Imagine Kalamazoo project site, I would guess. Yep. And so, as commissioners, we should be on the lookout for that, as well as the public. And there was some mention of maybe having a public meeting in June at some point to review some of those changes and receive comment on those.
Correct. There's not a date set, but
Beth, I think it is, yeah.
the intent would be to do a similar open house format in June to present the changes and go over it.
Wonderful. So be on the lookout for that information as well. And let me see, just a couple other notes I made here. Bookkeeping. A reminder, and this could probably wait, but I'll do it now because it's relevant to this process. We will not be meeting on July 6th. Our next meeting will be July 20th, where presumably we'll be having a discussion over those changes and over those comments. So you'll have plenty of time to review that document, review those changes, and that'll really be our opportunity to go, well, wait, I really think this should be changed, or I don't think that should be changed, or the staff will really be looking to us to provide some thoughts and comments and any concerns, pushback, et cetera, at that time. And but that will not be a formal public hearing. That will not be a time for us to make a decision, because it'll really be our first time looking at those edits and comments, or edits and changes. So, but that will be on July 20th and not July 6th. And then I just remind everybody, the NFP committee is meeting, and those meetings are available online, and they have been reviewing that chapter of the ordinance and that section of the ordinance. And so it might be, I've been enjoying watching their discussions and sort of educating myself on, okay, well, why are these changes being recommended and what's their thoughts on those? So, as we're receiving feedback, it's good to kind of hear what's going into those comments, and they're considering these changes and what changes should be made to the original draft. So, maybe take a look out to those recordings on the city's YouTube channel. All right. Anything else, Mr. Durkee?
Nope, the updated site plan list was in the packet unless there's any questions on specific projects on that list.
Seeing none, we'll move to public comments. So we've got another opportunity for public comment. This is public comment on non-agenda items. Are there any public comments on non-agenda items? Seeing no one in the audience, again, if you're watching online and you have public comment on non-agenda item, please feel free to call in at 888-382-9556. Okay, it's a beautiful night out. So we'll move on then to City Commission liaison comments. Commissioner Prado.
Good evening, everyone. I'll try to keep it relatively short tonight. It's a beautiful night out. I want to congratulate the Stewart neighborhood residents for all their work on the plan, and to Jay, of course, for work you put in as well. But we're looking forward to that coming to City Commission, and appreciate all that work that went into bringing us to this point. We had 2 recent open houses on the two-way conversion downtown. We had one at Bell's Brewery, which brought in about 150 people that evening to learn more and check out the display boards, talk with the experts in the room. There was another held this week at the Catalyst Center, so we're really pleased to see that engagement. If you haven't seen them already, there are 5 excellent videos. It's a 5-part series about that conversion project, and you can just visit those on the City of Kalamazoo's YouTube page, and definitely check out all 5 of those. And then lastly, a couple exciting openings coming up here in the next week. Kick Pool opens up on June 7th. I guess that constitutes really the official first day of summer in Kalamazoo. And then also Lunchtime Live returns to Bronson Park a week from this Friday on June 9th. So that's all I have for you tonight, and hope you have a great start to summer.
Planning Commissioner comments. Any Commissioner comments? Yes, sir.
One quick one. Just wanted to, 2 quick ones. First one is on the first Fridays of every month. We meet up at Factory Coffee downtown for the Kalamazoo contractors, developers to connect. So it's a local conversation with community contractors, developers, to just talk about the progress and some of the things happening, share resources and opportunities. So I want to put that out there to the community and all our partners just about that. And then the second one, just wanted to give a quick shout out to the Millwood Baseball League that is playing games tonight. So hopefully everybody had a great time, and check us out on the YouTube channel.
Awesome. Thank you. Yep.
I have just 2 comments. One, I wanted to thank the staff for putting together the presentation for the two-way conversions. I thought that the one at Bell's ran really nicely. The material was laid out very well, and the staff was very helpful with answering questions. And I just thank you guys for all the work that you did, because I know that that was a hard pull to try to make sure that you let the community know what's going to be happening soon, and accepting comments from the community as well. So I do want to thank you for that. My second comment of the night, we're always looking here at the city for people to serve on the different boards. You can always go to the city's website. There are openings on many different boards if you have interest in whether it be planning, whether it be natural features, whether it be our civil rights board. There are many different openings if you do want to participate. Also, the city commission will have open seats this November. So if those of you who are interested in actually serving even further with the city, being a city commissioner or even possibly running for the mayor, those applications can be picked up with the city clerk's office, anytime during the week so that you can get those in. So if you have interest in being on our board, definitely go to the city's website. And if you're interested in running for mayor or running for a city commissioner seat, we will have 3 seats open this year, plus the mayor. So if you know anyone or you yourself are interested, make sure that you stop by the city clerk's office as soon as possible.
Awesome. Thank you. You guys stole a lot of my thunder, but won't stop me. I want to thank the 3 of you who were served on the nominating committee again. I know that's a lot of work, and I appreciate you all being available so that I didn't have to be available. So, but no, thank you for doing that, and thank you for everyone who applied and put yourself out there, and hopefully a spot is found for those that did not make it, and I look forward to Curtis and Christina, sorry. Christina and Mitchell, I don't know where, I merged your names together. So Mitchell and Christina, I look forward to meeting you and getting to work with you over the next several months. The Two-Way Streets project is massive and it's awesome, and I encourage everyone to get engaged and get knowledge on it. The Imagine Kalamazoo website has all the information. It's got the current plans, the concepts on it. It'll be pretty awesome. It's going to be, we're all going to face some challenges as it is underway and as things are in flux, etc. But the final product is going to be great. And so as long as we all just work through that together and give everyone grace, it'll be an exciting process. And I thank you, Commissioner Pradel, for pointing out the openings we have coming up next week. Kickpool is the real jewel of the city, and so I am so looking forward to that opening. So with that, if there's nothing else, and our agenda being clear, we will adjourn this meeting. Thanks, everybody. What's that?